Ladies and gentlemen, it is Wednesday. We're DebateSensei. We got Tim Seavey from Visolutions in San Diego State University. We got Matthew Shapiro, Esquire.
Hello.
The lag. All right. I'm Jared Kubika-Miller, debate coach, professor of communications. We are talking about arguments and refutation. It kind of goes hand in hand. It kind of goes, both of them are going to be organically talking about each other. But we were kind of over the last 5 weeks, we were talking about like complicated,
specific
topics. Yeah. We're applying this stuff, but we thought, let's take a step back and take a really big picture approach and talk about something that applies to all debate, like by definition.
It transcends debate. I mean, it's like a way of just thinking. I mean, once you debate was, in my experience, I think the first place where I really understood just like organizing your information in a certain way and understanding how, when we talk even about stock issues and stuff, understanding the substance of how they are different. And just once you understand the way of thinking in debate as a context, it becomes automatic. You start thinking that way.
I'm glad because I couldn't understand a thing that you said until you started debating. So yeah. I'm glad organized.
I barely am making it.
All right. So what I like, since becoming a professor, and now I've been doing this for over a decade, right? And I get the privilege to like look deeper into this and think longer about it and stuff like that. And so I had an opportunity, to kind of like reread the original texts of some of this stuff. And it kind of helped me develop my own understanding of what an argument is. But we always got to start with definitions, right? That's like, I think that's the first section of debate. Yeah. Always is definition. So how do we define argument?
China.
Yeah.
I'm just kidding.
No, how do you define argument? What is an argument? Because it's actually kind of hard.
Tim, you're first.
I'd say it's an organized, contentious claim or a normative statement that can be refuted.
Okay. Yeah, I think what isn't an argument? That's one way I think, and it's like it's not an assertion. I think
not an argument though.
I think the clearest thing that is not an argument is a question. When you ask a question, that's not an argument.
But you can make a point. You can make a point with a question.
No. Legitimate questions.
Okay. I want to finish my answer. Excuse me. One thing an argument is a whole linear thought that I get to say before you can start telling me what my argument is. So, I think it's not an assertion. An assertion has no. I don't want to start using terms, but it doesn't have any connecting of dots which make it make sense.
It has no support. That's what support. Yeah, you know what I mean?
We're going to start using very specific terms for these things. I'm just kind of like trying to stay away from it. An argument is stringing together assertions to making something bigger than the sums of themselves. And once you get enough assertions that make some premise true, then you have an argument.
Yeah, and so there's an important distinction that's usually found in the literature, and sometimes they distinguish it between argument 1 and argument 2, and that's the difference between having an argument versus making an argument. You know what I mean? So when people use
operationalizing, like an operation, like the thought of trying to say something and actually getting it out correctly. Is that what you're saying?
I mean, like when you say it's like, I was having an argument with Matt the other day.
Oh, like negative, like I was beating my wife. Or
like the words still make sense. That's the context. Yeah, that's a different way that we're talking about it. So what y'all are talking about is the making an argument, and so like we're talking about the parts of the argument, and so I always think about it as a one or more propositions of which one is claimed to be supported by the others.
Okay.
Arguments are what my parents do after they put us to bed. Right? Oh man, I just had to say that.
Oh man,
Jared, you were right. it's
on
stringing
assignment,
together.
I'm like, oh, that's the saddest submission I've ever gotten right there. Oh god.
Hey, argument. I think one of the things that we're making your point on is argument. People do in lay world or in just the world. When you say an argument, that could mean a fist fight. I mean, reality, like blood. I mean, that's not an argument.
Kind of,
When I think of an argument, I think of words strung together, which makes sense and make a point to try to convince someone of something. That's what I mean. I think an argument is.
Is a logical, is a syllogism an argument?
Yeah.
What's a syllogism?
So
I can't even spell syllogism.
It was the way that it was taught, right? Up until Stephen Toulmin, and that trips me out. Like, we gotta pause and think about it. Is that first off,
straight went from like Aristotle to Toolman, like that, without anything in between?
I haven't found it. I found it. You know what I mean? But part of it is that the communication.
He was there.
Studies, communication studies as a field is relatively new, and so it's communication studies that really sort of popularized Stephen Toulmin.
And not necessarily just like oratory, right? I mean, I could think of Cicero, right? He have the canons of oratory, and but that's not necessarily comm studies. I'm not saying that those are synonymous.
The syllogism is Aristotle. Yeah, the syllogism is Aristotle. And so when we're talking about arguments and we're talking about the parts of arguments, like the canons of rhetoric are things that you could apply to an entire speech. But when you're talking about arguments,
the substance.
We're talking about like propositional level, like
logos
by sentence analysis, not like did they meet the demands of the event or something like that? It's just like
words.
It's really the diagramming level of arguments, and it's a fascinating part of argumentation studies, the ability to model it and diagram it, and like bubbles and stuff like that. And that's what syllogisms did, right? Major premise, minor premise, conclusion.
Yeah.
And so that was a deal for forever. And then Stephen Toulmin comes out with the uses of argument, and
he was a supermodel, right?
Yeah.
Toulmin, the supermodel.
Yeah. Toulmin just died like in 2009. Like he taught at
RIP.
Yeah, like I mean, it's like the I think it's a pretty amazing story about how, because it really was sort of a critique of the syllogism about some of the things. And one of the things that the syllogism didn't really capture was how people used natural language when they're arguing. And that's like that was like the title of the chapter was, like natural language. And so the claim, data, warrant part of the syllogism is like how to describe.
Is that the Toolman model? Claim, data, warrant? I mean, well, hold on. We're using some big $5 words, and I'd like to believe that all of our people watching us are literally smarter than us and know exactly what we're saying. But in the odd chance that people don't know a couple of these words, what is a syllogism, Jared? I mean, syllogism, I understood, is what? Premise, conclusion. The two premises together.
Yeah. Major premise, minor premise.
Yeah.
You have a major premise, minor premise, and then a conclusion. And so Toolman model kind of mirrors that, where the conclusion is the claim. But the thing is that the claim is oftentimes the first thing people say, not the last thing.
Well, an example. People who can't do teach. Jared is a teacher. Jared can't do, right? That was two premises which lead to a conclusion.
It was, man.
And that is a messed up one, and Jared can do. Trust me, that dude does.
So, okay, but still, even in that one, is like when you start off with those.
That's called a fallacy. That's another lesson we can learn here.
Yeah, well, the thing is that the tool model helps like identify fallacies even easier. But like that's the big three parts, right? Is like claim, data, warrant. So it's
that's Toolman model. That's the model.
Yeah, that's 3 of the 6. That's the main 3. That's the
big 3, right? Yeah. I mean, we were talking about this before, and I was joking, and Tim jokingly, we're agreeing. There's 3 parts of the Toolman model. Jared's saying there's more, but he's a flat earther, so don't believe anything he says. Claim, data, warrant. What does that mean? Who wants to explain what that means? I don't know what that means.
Should we figure the 6-parter though?
He'll get to that. We have a long show. It's gonna be a good show.
it mirrors the major premise, minor premise, conclusion. It's just that the claim mirrors the conclusion, the warrant mirrors the major premise, and the data mirrors the minor premise. Those three parts are still kind of there, and they still kind of line up. But
warrant is something I think a lot of people have a hard time with. Like, aside from when they're waving it in your face to search your house, what is warrant, Jared? Explain. Claim is like, the end point. It's often the assertion that's being made. But what is the
So people misuse this term all the time, and it's just the reason why your evidence supports your claim. And so it's really simple stuff. It's kind of like, this is an example of that, or this person is an expert in that, or this is an analogy for that. Those are like ways that we reason. Those are more inductive explanations, right? So like when you're using logic, you're typically using one of those types right there. There's like really 5 major types. And so you could describe any warrant in those terms, right? It's like, this is an example of that, or any number of things. So that logic is also where fallacies are committed, right? And you say this is an example of that. It's like, this like not an example of that. And so you start like pointing out the reasons why like you did an inferential leap that didn't apply. So the warrant is usually the weakest part of any argument, because it's the easiest one to kind of launch a response to. It's the easiest place for refutation, for sure.
And this is kind of one of those things where I try to explain to people how you can use reason and logic and say something that's completely untrue, or I've been using the word truth. It's kind of a weird word to use, but
and vice versa. You could use fallacies and still come to something that's accurate.
Yeah, and so these methods, these structures, structured arguments, whether it be in debate or whatever context of the structured argument, you're doing, like you can use these things to organize information very quickly. I mean, like a parley debater, once you understand the context of bringing this back to debate, like what does Stephen Toulmin do for debate? I think what one thing that he does is he talks about organizing information a certain way. A claim is the conclusion. Jared
people start with it, right? Like that's the whole point. That becomes your thesis on a paragraph. So like the Toolman model like really helps. It really helped me write paragraphs better.
How so?
It's like just straight up. It's just kind of like, it's like, I just want to have these parts to it, and that's why you got to know the 6 parts, not just the 3, because then you'll have really really short paragraphs that aren't very sophisticated or anything like that. I really liken it to a chord. In music, you know what I mean, where the claim is like the root, and then
what's the guy's name? Wittgenstein or something like that.
Yeah. So here's the deal. So Stephen Toulmin, Stephen Toulmin studied under Ludwig Wittgenstein. All right, and he's like this big hitter philosopher type. He's the one who when I started recognizing sort of connections between like, musical concepts and argumentation concepts, I started doing research like I do to understand things. And that led me to Wittgenstein. There was, some things that he was talking about in one of his later publications or his posthumous publications about aesthetics.
Posthumous publication? He was dead and he published it? Dang.
Yeah. It was just like
talented.
It was just like
you published today, right?
Yeah. And so like he's talking about aesthetics, and there's a connection between communication and music. And I'm really trying to explore that more. But I think that like it's really the same thing, is that you can play several notes at the same time, and it just kind of gives you a richer experience. The same thing, all these propositions are kind of resonating at the same time against each other, but there's always a root. You know what I mean? There's always the one in your argument, the thesis and everything like that. And that's always your claim. And you could have a bunch of other notes, you know what I mean? You could have a
Yeah.
bunch of that. You could have 2 others, you could have 5 others, you know what I mean? It's like, and then that creates a very rich sort of story and experience for audience members.
Or a more bolstered argument as far as the, you know, if you're fleshing it out more and more, using all the notes.
Yeah, that's why you got to know the other parts, because that makes it rich. So it's
Yeah.
you got a qualifier, reservation, some people call it rebuttal, and backing. Those are the other 3 parts. Okay. So a qualifier kind of modifies your claim. So you say sometimes or more often than not, or something like that. Right.
Only a Sith deals in absolutes.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. That's right. And so that modifier kind of really helps, like, especially strategizing for future speeches and stuff like that. You know what I mean? It's kind of like you kind of spike out of certain arguments that you know that are coming. You know what I mean? With
it gives you a little room. I mean, to like, you know, say about, you know, what's really going to hurt.
So is your refutation, or what was the other word for it?
Reservation.
So your reservation and your backing, is that like preempting and responding to potential counter arguments?
Yes. Now the reservation is what supports or explains the qualifier. So it's kind of like, why do you say sometimes? It's like, well, there's these exceptions, right, or these reservations to it, and so it's really the relationship between reservations and qualifier. Qualifier is part of the claim. Backing is any additional support for your data or warrant. So if you're kind of like, oh, I got this, you know, thing from NPR, and you're like, why the hell should I trust NPR? You're like, all right, here's their awards.
I don't.
Yeah. You say like, and so that additional sort of step beyond where you just throw a little bit more and bolster it up a little bit more. First off, helps in writing. You know what I mean? It's kind of like if you're, I mean, seriously, like if you're a student and you're looking for word count, it's just like this.
And just to be like rudely clear here, I mean, what he's saying is learn what the Toolman model is, and then apply it to a point that you're making in your paper, and just start with your claim as your conclusion, which ironically enough goes often first. People may not think that way, but say what you're trying to say. You know, I don't want to keep going back to my conclusion right now, but you know, you start with your claim and then flush through all these ideas through these lenses. I mean, and this is kind of
but sometimes it's really artistic and creative to start with something else. Like, what if you start with just a statistic? You know what I mean? It's like you start with the evidence. That's
start with a Shakespeare quote. That's what you do.
Yeah, it's like 500,000 people have died since last year from COVID.
40 and 20 years ago.
And then the next line is like, here's my plan to do something about it, right? That like your claim follows the evidence. You might have good reason for it. I think understanding the Toolman model actually gives you that freedom. You know what I mean? It kind of like, these are the parts that you're working with, but you can put them in any order that you want, you know? And so that's
where the art comes in, I think, whether on paper or, you know, in a debate round. You know, everything is unique and every argument is unique. And sometimes you'll be working on something and things will fall into an organizational row where you're like, this makes sense. It makes the story make more sense, you know, and they really can make you appreciate what other people are saying too. Like oftentimes you'll hear people deliver really good arguments and you can kind of like, it's cool because most people just think, you know, especially outside of debate communities and stuff like this, like people think that some people are just good at talking, you know, but other people are like, oh, I can kind of track what they're doing, you know, with their words. And it does come down to eloquence and stuff like that. But at some point, the logo section of debate, the argument, the substantive points, the points you're making, not how you're saying them, you know, you can get a lot of strength, credibility, all that stuff from bolstering those things using structures like Toolman or debate as you're used to in debate, you know, plan to, you know, there's various structures we deal with in debate. So Toolman applies to all of them.
When you map these pieces onto the parts, like the actual organizational pieces of like a disadvantage, right, or of an advantage on a plain text, I find that they sometimes map in really cleanly, right? Like especially if you're using your taglines effectively, like you are making a claim with the tagline of an advantage. Like
Yes.
this will make the world better,
Oh,
right?
A conclusion, a claim. Yeah. Just
Now, granted,
No,
they don't
I
act
would-
perfectly, but
Yeah, no,
Go ahead.
I would go one level down below that. Is every subpoint or stock issue is an argument. So when you're making a unique,
don't get scared. Everyone just chill. Okay, breathe. and
like you
listen,
make a uniqueness claim, and then you have any sort of evidence or warrant.
Toolman that.
one
Toolman that
claim.
alone.
So like Stephen Toulmin like explicitly said that the model that he was proposing was for a sentence by sentence level analysis. It wasn't for like bigger and longer parts. It's really when you get down to it. So you're only talking 6 sentences max for each Toolman model. Okay, so it wouldn't be. So it would be those. So most
unless
people,
you start doubling up or something.
yeah, most people just do claim data, and they let the warrant be implied. They just
that's called an enthymeme, by the way.
Yeah,
when it's like when an enthymeme is a fancy word. First of all, thank you, college. I learned a word. Enthymeme is when you kind of infer a point, and points in conversation are very often inferred. So exactly. I mean,
but like you say, here's what I believe. Here's the evidence for it.
Right. And that's so being able to tie those pieces together. Now, Jared, are you saying though that like each point, so uniqueness needs to be flushed out. So uniqueness is an argument and therefore justifies data and a warrant as well?
Of the uniqueness.
Usually here, uniqueness is just data. Like it's usually just that step. There's not really like and it could be more flushed out, but just as I see it in debate, very rarely is uniqueness more than one sentence. And
but you say, Tim,
when
you think about it, what you're saying is in a debate round, what you kind of are saying is like, you may have a judge and a competitors who know what uniqueness means. Okay. And so if everyone's working in this room on assumption of exactly, I just say one word, uniqueness. And then I say, 400 people died. That actually, we're all working in a realm at that point based on a lot of assumptions, which are correct. I mean, everyone's working within this framework. But technically speaking, if you were to take a brand new person off the street, you'd say uniqueness. Uniqueness means this is not, a special problem. This will happen no matter what, or whatever the argument is. These are sentences that you say before your data, which is whatever you'd say.
So part of what he's saying is totally true about like the using jargon kind of shortcuts the warrant part of it, right? Yeah. It's like normally if you were speaking in front of like an audience without that sort of background, you kind of have to explain a little bit more, and that would be
public forum tries to do
logic. That would be you explaining your logic. But when you get down to uniqueness, usually what is made is when they make a they have their claim, like if you're thinking about like a card in debate, right? They wrote their claim up top and then they read their evidence. That's 2 parts right there. You wrote one part and you're reading another part. So that like you're using that data. So even a single card is like an enthymeme, right? Where you have 2 parts of what should be a 3-part argument. If you want
the point is made, hopefully, and the point is made.
Yeah. If you want a richer experience, you could add backing, you could do a qualifier, you could have, a better explained warrant just to kind of make that sort of richer. But like debate is so streamlined at this point, the warrants are all left implied, right? It's kind of like everyone knows what uniqueness means.
Yeah,
everyone knows what.
And this is actually a critique on debate. Like a lot of people are a lot of people don't like jargon, kind of, because what it ends up doing is someone who is new, especially who comes into this world, they go into a room and people are speaking a language they basically don't understand because everyone's operating on all these understandings that they don't have yet. You know what I mean? And so, and the average world person doesn't have it. That's the big thing too. Like when you try to run a straight high level policy round in front of someone who has no idea what's going on and just got off the beach surfing, like they don't know what is going on. You know what I mean? And I'm not saying that's bad. I love debate. I love the community. I love the activity. But I can also understand how like we end up working in this realm of enthymemes and debate a lot with jargon specifically. So and to credit all of you, that
People
knowledge.
get the answers, right? It's like in refutation, what you're doing is 4-point refutation,
Yeah.
a full argument. But usually people say, my first response is this, my second response is that, my third response is this. You know what I mean? And all they're doing is they're implying, sometimes they follow it up with like actual evidence. My first is that's not true. According to this, I have evidence, right? You know what I mean? It's like, that's fine. That's, you know what I mean? That becomes that sort of claim data sort of structure. But what they're doing is they're just doing assertions, and assertions are just claims
with nothing.
No other parts of the argument. That's all it is.
So,
claim.
So on two fronts, but first since you just addressed it, like on the 4-step refutation is supposed to be addressing what they say. So that's they say, but I say because therefore. That's the common way that you teach 4-step refutation. Right. So that is, it's the because and therefore steps that I think are just straight up taken from the Toolman model. So they say that, we need to prioritize the economy, but I say we need to prioritize the environment because the environment is experiencing all these major issues, climate change, whatever. Therefore, it is more important to, and so it's that weighing of the two. Now that doesn't come directly necessarily from Toolman, but the therefore step tends to pull that piece together. I'm sure that you can kind of map a little bit of origin from that, but I think that that's where. So go ahead.
It's not hard to map it. It's the because is the claim. I say because is the data, and the therefore is the warrant, is the reasoning why this thing is like. And so you don't need much effort lining it up, right? The they say part isn't part of your argument. All you're doing is telling people where to make
sign something. So where I think that you said Toolman's entire model was meant to be applied at a sentence by sentence level of analysis, right? And so you think that applies to each stock issue. I would still say that some of the units that we use to describe or to make an argument within debate that, include jargon, but things like a link or things like sometimes you use a brink or internal links, or there are different structures that you can use. But I would say that uniqueness doesn't necessarily need to have a claim, data, a warrant to it, a qualifier. I would say that uniqueness can still be used if you're effectively using taglines. You can have your tagline as your claim, uniqueness as some of your data, and your links become your warrant. Am I, completely off base there? Like that's how I see most disadvantages typically flowing that still kind of map along with the organization.
I want to jump in just because I know Jared's just chomping at the bit, so that's why I want to answer. Again, just hearing what you're saying, like the reason why we can say one word uniqueness in debate and just be on the level of understanding that means this is not unique. This is going to either happen some other way, or this is going to happen, it will never happen, or will happen no matter what. The reason why you don't have to explain this every time is because debate, when you get high level, it's very redundant. Like we don't need to hear, you don't need to explain to me exactly, what everything means. I'll just track with you because we can speed up and go crazy in here and explore worlds beyond just reiterating some of the most basic premises of what these words mean. So it is an entity.
The thing about jargon is that it's a shortcut. That's all it is. And so all you're saying is like when you say uniqueness, that implies a lot of things that you only know because you've been doing this for years.
Yes.
And if you had to explain those things, that's where all of the claims would come in that you'd be able to map. Jargon makes it harder to map. Like if you're going to map it, you would put the word uniqueness as the claim. Mm-hmm. And then you'd put these things, anything that's listed underneath it as data, but it doesn't have the information embedded in it. Now, so Wittgenstein said that words are not the corpses of meaning. And what he was talking about was that you can't just go and inspect a word and just magically understand what was meant by it, right? It's something that has to be learned through socialization with other people and constant usage of the term. It has to be.
We have to agree to what it means, basically. I mean,
no, you have to see it used over a bunch of different times in order to truly understand it. And the thing is that when you see it used a bunch of different times, specifically in rounds, right? Now you have meaning that you have that every time you hear the word, now you kind of ascribe it to that.
Meaning is another word for
that
premise built in. That's
that
a premise built
the
in.
claim.
Yeah.
That replaces the claim. And so it's
Yeah.
kind of like you're saying this is uniqueness is your claim. The only response would be it's like, no, it's not.
Well, they
That
say
actually
that uniqueness
pretty good
is
response.
in itself like can be fully unpacked, but I say that uniqueness can be just data only because we can organize an entire argument.
What do you mean? Like,
we don't use the jargon words to still have an entire Toolman well laid out argument, like jargon aside, using those same structures. If I were to follow all the steps of a common disadvantage, right, and I didn't use any of the jargon words, though, I would contend that that is still probably a well organized Toolman approved argument.
Yeah, uniqueness would be its own Toolman argument.
Tim, I don't mean to put you on the spot.
Not the whole advantage. The whole advantage would be 4 arguments. You need to make 4 arguments to make 1 advantage, is what I'm saying.
I see that's what you're saying, but I was using 4-step refutation to disagree.
Let me ask you this as we bleed over 30 minutes here.
All right.
Tim, yeah, go ahead. Never mind.
It's a fun. Hey, like you can tell, I like talking about this. I think it's important stuff that really. When you argue about fundamentals, it's good because you're kind of laying like ground rules for everyone. You know what I mean? It's kind of like we're all talking about
this stuff isn't
fairness.
easy.
It's always about fairness.
This stuff isn't easy.
Great.
This is some high level thinking. I mean, this is not easy to organize information like this and to understand it quickly and to get it to be a second nature. This is hard. And but I'm passionate about it. I love it. It makes me
It's fun. It's
happy.
Philosophical. All right, everybody. Hey, that's our time. Okay, we got Tim CV from Visolution, San Diego State University. We got Matthew Shapiro, Esquire. We got Jared Kubica Miller, the professor. I'll see you next week, as we all will.
Take it easy.